Hello everybody, and welcome to Suffolk Public Library's Get Creative for the month of October. We are going to be doing something very fun today. We're going to be making something that's very functional. Hopefully, if we do it right, it will be very functional. We are going to be making some coasters out of these mosaic glass tiles, and we are going to turn this, what is currently just a plain tile, into a lovely, colorful mosaic piece. And we'll be able to use it for all of our drinks. It'll be lovely. So our first thing that we always do is we gotta gather our materials. Now you can register for a materials kit from the Suffolk Public Library if there are still some available. And what you will get if you get one of those is a tile and a little tile backing that's the same shape. We'll add this on later just so that it doesn't scuff up your table or anything. It's just a little bit of cork. And you'll get a handful of some glass pieces. And what we're going to be using today is a Mosaic fiberglass mesh. It's like a sticky mesh that will give us a little bit of room to stick our tiles down before we grout them. We're also going to be using just a powdered grout. It'll be a powdered grout that we then mix with water to turn it into our grout. You do have some options if you're trying to gather your own materials. I would recommend having something that is non-porous before you're adding on your tiles and your grout. So if you have just some like MDF or some fiberboard, if you have some random tiles laying around, you can absolutely use those. Or if you have some wood, you can just paint them with acrylic paint. That will seal them up well enough so that the water on them, both once we're working with them and grouting them, and once you're using them as a coaster, doesn't start to warp the wood. So you'll want to make sure that they're sealed. And then the other thing is, you don't necessarily have to use the sticky mesh, especially if you're just planning on making one. You can use something like this, which is like a weld bond, which is intentionally made for like tiles and ceramics, or you can use the E6000 glue. So there's a couple of options. Those are what you're going to be using for like sticking down your tiles initially, so that they are stuck onto your base before you grout. So you have a couple of options when you're trying to, if you're looking to assemble your own kit, if you aren't able to register for one of our kits, if we fill up. So those are some options for you. We'll go ahead, once you gather everything, do take a look and try to take some precautions, prep your space. You might want to lay some newspaper down, make sure that you're being careful, and if you are working with anything that says fiberglass, like this here, you might want to wear some gloves. We're going to get a little bit messy today. You might want to wear some clothes that you aren't worried about if they get a little bit messy, if they have some concrete or some grout on them. So just do be advised. Alright, but we are going to get started with the first step, which will be the really, really fun part. You get to kind of carefully go through the glass pieces. If you don't want to do that with your hands, you can grab like a spoon or like a little popsicle stick to kind of gently go through. But most of these, they aren't too sharp. If you work with other tiles, though, I cannot guarantee what other tiles you might have and what their condition might be. So just be careful. Remember that these are little glass pieces. So we're going to be going through our tiles, picking what we want, and kind of working on our layout. So that's the really fun part. So see you in the next section. Alright, so I have my layout here, and you can see that I have quite a few gaps. Everywhere you can see the white, that's our existing tile underneath. That's fine, we're going to fill that in with grout. We need a little bit of space for the grout to pack in anyway. If you want, you can leave fewer spaces and a tighter bit of space. You can fill them in quite tighter. I wanted to give it a little bit of breathing room, one to not use up quite so many tiles, and one to just kind of give it an option. You can, keep swapping out with your colors. I think I'm just about okay with it. I don't want to be too precious with my color scheme here. I want it to be all pretty close in this color family with a couple of the accents, without going too far. We're not worried about getting the exact same color of everything, which is also going to be helpful if you are trying to, find only the exact shape, only the exact color. There may not be enough. So having a little bit of flexibility in your design is not only going to help give it a little bit more interesting look, but is going to save you a little bit of frustration in your searching. So I think this is where I'm happy with it. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to set my bin of extra pieces aside, and just for myself, I'm going to take my backing and move these over one by one in order to keep the design intact. If you would prefer, you can also take a picture right now when you have it laid out. I'm just going to move it over though and hope that I remember. And if it's a little bit off, that's okay. If you are using just a glue like this, then you can just pick them up one by one and glue them down. You don't have to move them all over. So it's really up to you, and it's up to whichever method you're using to glue them down. But since we're going to be using the mesh, or at least I'm going to be demonstrating the mesh, we're going to need to clean off the entire surface. So I'm going to just transpose it right over to here so that we can still have a very clear image of what we want our design to be. And then we'll do our stick down. So now we have our dry layout. We've been able to kind of play around with things the way that we want it. Trust me, I went through a lot of different versions before, so take that time to just really play around. What do you think is working? What do you think isn't working? Swap out one for another and try the different angles, all of those things. That's the fun of it. You really get to play around with it before it's stuck. You aren't committed to anything at this stage. So once you get it the way you like it, now we're going to do the work of sticking it down and committing to it. So that's what we'll do next. Alright, so we have our sticky mesh here cut roughly to size. What I'm going to do first is just trim it down to the exact shape of our base tile, and then I'm going to get started actually transferring over my little glass tiles. So this is pretty easy to cut with just a pair of scissors. Like I said, if you would prefer to use just a glue, you can use that weld bond or like an E600 or E6000 to use just a glue, and you can glue down your tiles individually. Something like that might get annoying for a really big project, but luckily with a coaster, it's pretty easy to just do them one by one. It's not too much of a slog. We're just cutting our mesh to the size of our base. I have it pressed down down onto my tile here. And we're just going to start have my sort of layout here. We're just going to start transferring over. I'm going to start with my center line. And I'm not going to press them down all the way yet. I want to get my center line completely laid out and exactly where I want it before I really press them down. So the big thing that you want to do is make sure that you're happy with your layout before you really cement it in place. So something like the mesh gives you a chance to kind of wiggle them around. Or usually the weld bonds, or some of the slow drying, slow setting glues give you a chance to kind of maneuver them around a little bit before they set immediately. So I'm just going to press them down now that I've got my center line done. So that now that I have this, I can start doing the rest. Alright, we are going to mix up our grout now. I recommend you take some precautions, you protect your space, cover your table, whatever you need to do. We are going to mix our grout in a 3-to-1 ratio. We're just going to get some water, and we're going to do 3 parts of the grout mix to 1 part water. We really aren't doing a lot to cover this, but we will go ahead and do 3, I'm just using spoonfuls of grout mix to 1 part water, and we're going to slowly add the water and mix. But let's go ahead and get this starting to incorporate. We'll need a little bit more. So you can purchase grout that's in different colors. Right now we just have this little white. marking onto my protected surface. Water out of the way. And this is another good time you want to use your gloves, because it's probably the easiest to do this actually with your hands. Now the grout that we have sets up fairly quickly. It sets up in about 15 to 20 minutes. And the biggest thing with grout is that you want to remember to wipe it off the top surface while it is still wet. So we're going to apply, just kind of gloop it on top, because we want it to get into all of the crevices. And in my case, also make sure that it covers all the way to the edge. Leave that for now. And what I'm going to do is really just make sure that it presses all the way into the edges. Now, I recommend that you get it to where you can just about see the top of your tiles. I might have added just a touch too much water. That's right. So I'm going to try and do this. Get a little bit messier than intended ribbing, because I'm not liking how much the gloves are moving things around. I'm going to just go in and wash my hands later. So I can already see how much the grout is starting to stiffen up and harden up on me, which in my case I'm a little bit thankful for, because I'm going to need it to have some integrity to be able to fill in our gaps along the edge here. But you just want to make sure that it's in all of your gaps between your tiles. Some of this extra. Make sure that it's filled in along the side. Got some more that I still have mixed up in my cup. I'm just gonna tuck in along the side. Now, if you want really neat edges, you can just come and scrape off. Like, you can just come and scrape off like that. And you might want to wait for it to harden up a little bit, stiffen up a little bit, but I'm okay with the edges being a little bit rough. I think if you need something, it doesn't. I don't want something that I need to look like it's coming from the factory, you know what I mean? Alright, there we go. It's already starting to dry. So what I want to make sure that we're doing is actually wiping off the grout from the top of our glass tiles before it completely hardens. So I've got just a wet paper towel. You can do that with a wet paper towel. You can do it with a sponge. You want to just make sure that the grout doesn't completely harden and set on top of your tiles. And this is where you don't want to have too much grout on top, because it can be a little tricky wiping it all away. Doing alright on the ones on the ends. My ones in the middle are getting a little bit lost. I might have to get a new paper towel. Just dipping it in my water. There they are. Don't want them lost under the ground. And you don't have to rush too fast with this. Remember, our grout sets in about 15 to 20 minutes, so you do have some time. If you are purchasing your own grout, you might want to check how quickly it sets before you start your process. But like about a 15-20 minute set period or a 20 to 30 minute set period is pretty standard. And you want it to get where it's starting to dry up so that it's easier to wipe away, but not so dry so that you're scraping your tile. So about 5-ish minutes in is usually pretty solid. Let's see, might have added too much over here, so I'm just scraping some of this excess off. Let's see, I might be able to reform it. There we go. I'm going to try and get this to cover up this edge here. This one got a little close to the end. Alright. And if you're happy with how well they're covered or uncovered, you can finish up and let your grout set. Keep excavating. Alright, there we go. I'm going to leave it at that. And then let my grout set all the way. So this is what it's going to look like. I'm going to let it completely finish setting, and then I'm going to add my cork backing to the back, and that's just a peel and stick, and then I will have my finished piece. I recommend that you let them completely cure for about 24 hours before your first use with, setting a drink on it or anything like that. But you have now created a lovely mosaic tile coaster. So I hope you had a really good time with it. Like I said, there are a limited amount of supply kits that are available if you register on our calendar on our website at suffolkpubliclibrary.com. Otherwise, you should have covered everything that you need in a little bit earlier part of the video if you want to do this yourself, or if you want to get more and make like a whole set. So, thank you for joining us, and I will see you guys for the next one.